The regular season is just around the corner for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but before we get around that corner, we have to answer the question, how real is the youth movement inside the Pittsburgh Penguins?
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes, our man on the ground at UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. You can also find us on Instagram at LockedOn_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Plus, if you follow us on YouTube, be sure to hit the notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we get into the Thursday episode, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com, and you could win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Hunter, we have got a jam-packed episode today because there is plenty to talk about. The Penguins got another big preseason win, this time in Buffalo. They made a bunch of moves and put a few players on waivers. We've also got to get into what we think the 23-man roster is going to look like. We're going to do all of that, but we got to start at the beginning. Last night in Buffalo, the Penguins get a 5-3 victory over the Sabres. And while we often say you don't need to worry about the result, you don't need to worry about the scores, you've got to check out the process. But for this instance, both matter in this case because it was another victory for the Penguins. It was largely thanks to a lot of their young players and prospects. And once again, it was against a roster that, while not quite the Sabres set NHL roster, there were still plenty of very good talents and NHL regulars involved on the Buffalo side. So let's start with a guy who we have been raving about for the past couple of weeks, and that is first-round pick Benjamin Kindel. Once again, he was one of the best players on the ice. And again, this was not in a prospects challenge. This was not against Buffalo's prospects and AHL players. This was against a roster that had a lot of NHL quality talent. And Kindel, once again, was one of the best players on the ice. This kid at 18 years old is so much further ahead of schedule than any of us could have predicted.
Oh, 100%. I mean, he did everything in the offensive zone to set up Dumba for an absolute clapper. Can we get more of that from Matt Dumba, by the way, this year? Because that was an absolute rocket of a slap shot. But Kendall set that whole thing up. He was electric in the offensive zone during that, got the primary assist. He was great the rest of the game as well. And it's no surprise, Pat, that he was practicing with the main NHL group today in Cranberry. You had group one, which was a lot of the guys that are going down to the AHL, some of the guys that got waived, but Kendall and Harrison Brunick were with the main NHL squad, which got underway at noon. That's by design, man. They are giving both of these guys, especially Kendall, I think a serious look at least a couple of games, maybe even a few games to start the season. Pat, you and I had a great conversation on Tuesday about, the 9-game trial, staying beyond that, where, you took the side of, you think he should get a few games, then going back to junior. I said, I think he should go back to junior as a whole. I will say I still stand by that, but the more that he keeps playing like this, coupled with Brian Russ' injury, where he's out for a minimum of 2 weeks, the more we may see him get a few games in the NHL before going back to junior. Pat, I know you agree with this too. It's not wise for him to be here for a full 82-game season. I don't want to burn a year of his ELC. But the first thing I thought of once I saw that Russ got hurt was that, okay, I actually think he might get a few games at the start of this season just because Russ isn't going to be healthy for the first at least 4 to 5 games of the year. This is going into right in the California trip. So that's the first thing I thought of. Honestly, the roster hasn't been announced yet for Friday's game. It's probably going to be announced any minute now. I'd be kind of surprised if he wasn't playing with the varsity squad for that game, because that's the dress rehearsal game. Considering that he and Brunick were both practicing with the main NHL guys, I'd be surprised if he didn't play. And that would be his 6th preseason game. Like, that's another opportunity to get a serious look at him before you have the final cuts coming, which is probably at the end of this weekend going into Monday.
And Dan Muse kind of said this after the game on Wednesday night, that he's looking at Friday as kind of the dress rehearsal. He pretty much confirmed that, saying that it would be a lot of the veterans who haven't gotten a lot of preseason time and seen a lot of action in these games. So that kind of tells you where Ben Kindel stands, at least in the eyes of head coach Dan Muse and maybe even Kyle Dubas. The thing that you brought up, because I did some back of the napkin math this afternoon when, hilariously, because of the barrage of news and the preseason game, I missed that Brian Rust had been hurt. I was looking at the training camp updated roster and saw his name under injured, did a little digging and saw, oh, okay. So yesterday they said that he's going to miss a minimum of 2 weeks. So if I do that back of the napkin math and you look at the Penguins schedule and if you do 2 weeks to the day, to today, October 2nd, Thursday, you're only about 5 games into the season.
Right.
So if we're going to operate in a perfect world where he does miss just 2 weeks, you can give Kindle 4 to 5 games. And if Rust is ready to come back, or if you feel like, okay, we've seen enough from him, given him enough of a taste, you can send him back and then call someone up in his place. Because we do know that a lot of the players we've had our eyes on aren't going to have to deal with waivers. So you'll be in a good spot where you can get some of these guys back up. But realistically, and I think this is a good spot for us to kind of wrap up the segment. You hinted at it. I know that you probably still have a similar take, but I think at this point, given the injuries, given who still remains at camp, it's difficult to say that he has not been one of the Penguins' 12 best forwards in this preseason. So if nothing else, he's earned that look, even if it is only for a few games.
We just have to see if they want to give it to him, because, Harrison Brunick, you can make an argument that he deserved a look last year. They said, hey, you got to the end. We're going to send you back to junior. We're not going to give you a look yet. And look how that played out. I could still see a world where even with this Russ injury, Pat, they're like, hey, we like everything you did. You got to the end. We're going to send you back right now and not give you a look yet, but we want you to use this and your junior season to come back even stronger next year, where you can really compete for a roster spot. And I do think his timeline hopefully has moved up. Like, we really could be talking about him pushing for a full-time spot next season. Like, again, if you want to argue, especially now with Rust is hurt, that he deserves a few games, I'm not going to argue against that. I just don't think he's ready for the grind that is an 82-game regular season at age 18 years old. It is extremely rare when you see someone picked where he was in the draft, going from the CHL to the NHL right away. So I'm just pointing that out. And I'm talking, Pat, like a full 82-game season. Heck, even just a few games, I feel like it's rare as well. So that's all I'll say on that. I'm obviously ecstatic about him. I'm over the moon about how he's playing, not disappointed or anything like that. I'm just saying, I hope people cool their jets a little bit, because going from the CHL to the NHL, like for a full season, that's a jump that I just don't think right now he is ready for. But as we talked about, maybe that gets him a couple of games. I'm still of the opinion that I would just send him back to junior right away. That's not going to be popular. I get that. But maybe he will get a couple of games. We'll just have to see.
I will add this to kind of back you up a little bit, because I've seen this comparison made a couple times on social media, as well as I'm pretty sure someone in our comment section made it. If you did, please let us know it was you. I want to make sure you get the due credit. There were comparisons made to Jordan Staal from way back in 2006. Here's the big difference to me. One, when Jordan Staal was drafted, he was already north of 6 feet tall. He was already well north of at least 170 pounds. He was a big, big player. The other thing is Jordan Staal's game has been a two-way forward since he came into the NHL.
Yeah.
He wasn't a highly touted offensive prospect. Yeah, he had a huge run with shorthanded goals, but that was born from his ability to kill penalties and being a massive guy. The thing for Ben Kindel is he is an offensive forward. He is nowhere near a liability defensively, and he has shown that in this preseason. He is very good in his own end. Obviously, there's room for improvement, but the difference here is, and I know that it's a different league now, that you don't have to be a gargantuan to survive, but he still does have to mature physically. And with time, just the general human growth cycle, he's going to get bigger, playing more hockey, working out, all of that. I do think, though, like you said, not ready for a grind of 82, but if you give him 4 to 5 in the absence of rust, you, like I said, you give him that taste, you give him that motivation, it's going to push him even harder to get here next year. But obviously, we've still got one preseason game to go, couple more days here in the preseason. We will see how it shakes out, but so far, so very good for the Penguins' first round pick. When we come back, we're going to keep the roster talk going and kind of give our thoughts on what an emerging 23-man roster might look like once the Penguins get done with the preseason and get ready for the Rangers on opening night. We will do that when we get back, so stick with us right after this. Before we do that, though, we've got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if it wins. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes watching football even more exciting, especially when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes game day so much better. So, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Back here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Penguins, I'm Patrick Damp, running right alongside the one and only Hunter Hodes, and we talked about Ben Kindel. It's been so much fun to finally be in this spot again where we can talk about an exciting young player who looks like they might actually become an NHL contributor rather than us wishing they would become an NHL contributor. But I digress. Let's dive into this, though, Hunter. What we think is going to be the 23-man roster. Let's begin with the very obvious. The goalies are going to be Tristan Jarry and Artur Shilovs. Whether you like it, you love it, you hate it, you don't want it, you got to learn to live with it. That's where that's going to go. Then things get interesting because we obviously know that it's a 23-man roster. You can carry a couple of people. Let's start with the defense. And let's start with Harrison Brunick. I think he's going to make the roster out of camp because, as you've said, he continues to practice with the varsity squad. He's continued to look like a legitimate NHL defenseman. And if this youth movement in Pittsburgh is real, he has been in the top 6 best defensemen in camp. And if you're not going to put up those roadblocks, I think it's his time.
Hey, that's fair. I mean, I did a mock 23-man roster earlier this week just for, fun. I had 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, 2 goalies. I can't wait to see how wrong this is. By the way, Pat, I sent you this earlier today. I had the 2 goalies. I know you did as well. I didn't have Brunick on my roster at the time just because of all, the veterans, especially on the third pairing that could be there. But hey, maybe they decide to keep 8 defensemen, for example, because I had 7 on mine. Maybe they decide to keep 8 defensemen and Brunick is there as an extra, and maybe he gets a little of that trial run. We'll have to see, but they're at least giving it some serious consideration. It's funny, I think also might make this roster defensively that I didn't have on mine. Caleb Jones. He's been getting a lot of practice time with Chris Letang on the second pairing. He was on his pairing today. He was on during the scrimmages, especially on last Sunday. He was on during the end of training camp. It's a little bit of a trend, which to me is a little concerning. Well, concerning a little bit, but also weird because I just haven't seen enough out of him during the camp in the preseason for him to get top 4 minutes going into the season. I just really haven't seen it. So not sure what the coaching staff in the front office is seeing there, but he might actually make this roster, which I'm going to be surprised by because I didn't really have him on my radar as much going into camp. Like, obviously, I knew they signed him during the offseason, but I figured he was going to be someone that would start with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. I didn't think he would still be getting 5 days before the start of the Penguin season, Pat, top 4 minutes with Chris Letang. I don't know how long that will last, but I don't know. I don't think he is deserving of that right now, considering the camp in the preseason he's had. But
I mean, we were pretty dismissive of him when they signed him. We kind of just barely mentioned it and said, "Yeah, it's a brother of one of he's Seth Jones' brother. He spent time in the AHL, been up and down." And I agree with you in the sense that it's been I don't want to say unimpressive because that kind of connotates that he's been bad, which he hasn't been. But I've noticed him, and I think he's had some positive moments, but he hasn't exactly blown me away. But maybe
I'd rather play Owen Pickering there, but honestly, I don't even know if Pickering is going to make the team at this point. I have him on my mock roster. I think he should be there, but he was also practicing with Group 1 today, Pat, which had some players that went on waivers and were cut. For example, Danton Heinen was placed on waivers. We'll get to that in a second. Aiden McDonough was sent down today. Kopanen was placed on waivers. Valtteri Pustin was placed on waivers. Philip Kemp. So Sebastian Aho. So I don't know. He may not even be making the team, which in my opinion, I think that is a mistake. I think he has had a better camp in preseason than someone like Caleb Jones has. Coaching staff may not see it that way, but that's how I see it. Obviously, it's not official yet where he hasn't or has made the team, but you can read the tea leaves a little bit. So just wanted to say that. But again, Caleb Jones, just odd to me.
And I think because you had 7 defensemen, I had 8.
Yeah.
So I look at it this way. Matt Dumba, obviously going to have a spot. I also think he's had a pretty strong preseason. Now, we'll see how it works out when we start playing for real. But I do think there has been, I don't want to say unfair criticism because he did struggle pretty heavily last year. He did not have a good year. But I think you can tell he feels a little bit motivated. He probably feels a little bit slighted that people are already writing him off as washed up, already done. And he very well could be. This could be just a hot start and he trails off. We have seen that numerous times throughout the NHL, but it's been a strong camp for him. The goal he had in Buffalo last night, I mean, I don't want to call it a goal scorer's goal, but he got every single piece of that shot. And it wasn't just a great shot. He was in a really good position to be in a place to score, which is always a positive. Obviously, you're going to have your regulars in Letang and Carlson. I think Ryan Graves is going to make it out of camp, but as I alluded to yesterday, the leash is not long. The coaching staff and the management are saying the right things about wanting him to get better and get the opportunity to get better. But again, as I said yesterday, if you read the subtext of what they're saying, it's basically like, put up or shut up, Ryan, or you're going to get put on waivers. And I think he gets that shot out of the gate. I also have Brunick and Pickering. I'm with you. I think it would be a mistake to send Pickering down. But I do think in a similar way to Graves, but with less negative, obviously much less negativity, I think it's an opportunity for him to prove that he belongs long-term. If he stays, plays well, they'll keep him up. If he struggles for a few games, they can send him back.
I think the thing with Pickering for me is what does he have left to learn in the AHL? Not really much of anything, in my opinion. I think he is ready for a role in the NHL. You don't need to play him top 4 right away. Like, maybe down the line, you could have him play with Chris Letang, even though I don't want him playing with Caleb Jones either, but that's a different story. You can have him start on the bottom pair and work his way up. Like, I think he's good enough for that, and he showed that during his stint last season. I just don't think he has anything left to learn in the AHL at this rate, in my opinion.
I agree with that sentiment, but I also think that there is, if you look at who is likely to make the team, he's not going to be on a top pairing role.
No.
You send him to the AHL, he's going to be a top pairing guy. And he is still of an age and at a point in his development where he would benefit more from getting those heavier minutes than he would in the NHL, but not for long. It shouldn't be for an extended period of time. It should really be looked at as a Band-Aid, as, hey, we're going to send you down there for a couple of weeks, get yourself recentered, get your game back, and then you're coming back.
That's fair. I can understand that. Like, for my 7 defensemen, I had Letang, Carlson, Weatherspoon, Pickering, and if that doesn't happen, I think Brunick might be there. I didn't have him, though, but I think that might happen at this rate. Ryan Graves, Connor Clifton, Matt Dumba. Graves, I don't expect him to be waived before the start of the season. I think they will give him, as you said, Pat, a little bit of a leash, and then if he continues to stink up the joint, I think Kyle Dubas would be like, hey, like Tristan Jarry last year, got to put you on waivers, man. You're not doing enough. Even though the contract situation is really bad with him, I think they would put him on waivers potentially during the season. I don't think it's going to be during training camp, though. Forwards, I have Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Brian Rust. Well, he'll be on the roster once he's back from injury, people. He'll start the season on IR. Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell, Ville Koivunen, I have him as a lock. I've seen some takes out there that, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts in Wilkes-Barre. I would. That's ridiculous to me, but okay. I know there's a lot of veterans on this team, but he's a lock. Tommy Novak, Justin Brazeau, Anthony Mantha, Philip Tomasino, Connor Dewar, Philip Hollander, Blake Lizotte, Avery Hayes, and Noah Chari. People are going to be upset about Noah Chari potentially making this team. I have him on my roster, but he is a popular guy in that locker room. They like that he kills penalties. He'll block a lot of shots. I think he'll at least start the season with the team. I don't think he's going to finish the season with the team, though, especially with the trade deadline coming up and all that. So I'd be a little surprised if he was cut. But, Pat, I was not surprised that Dan Heinen was placed on waivers today. Of the veterans that you could waive, the veteran forwards, that is, he was the easiest and the most obvious one to waive, especially after he did not play well in that game against Buffalo. It felt like he was kind of going through the motions a little bit. And some of these younger players, they took advantage of this game. And yeah, a lot of these younger guys are going to play hard because they're playing for jobs. Some of the veterans are not really trying to get hurt. But I still wanted to see a little bit more from Danton Heinen because younger players are going for his spot. So I didn't have him on my mock roster because I actually had him getting waived. So I'll get that one at least a little bit right. We'll see if someone claims him. But that opens up also a spot for a younger player. And I have Avery Hayes making this team. It was between him and Tristan Brose. It's really close. I'm giving the edge to Hayes. I can't wait to see how many of these I get wrong, though, so I can clown myself next week.
You and me both, because I do not envy Dan Muse, the coaching staff, and Kyle Dubas right now, because the hardest decision is going to be these young players, because a whole bunch of them have shown that they belong. You can disagree with their developmental timeline and all of that, and I would hear you out on it. We already had the discussion about Kendall, but a lot of these young players, more than anything, have not looked out of place whatsoever. And it has happened not just with Kendall, but with plenty of them, that they have looked good in every situation. They have looked good against the visiting team who is bringing their B squad on the road. They have gone on the road and played against the almost A squad and looked really good, which is a really positive sign for the organization. The hardest decision that I see it forward right now is what you brought up, and it's 3 names: Philip Hollander, Avery Hayes, and Tristan Brose. All 3 of them have made serious cases to spend time in the NHL this year, but they're going to run out of spots because you went over the locks. You've obviously got Rakell, Crosby, Mantha, Malkin, Koivunen, Lizotte, Tomasino, Novak, and Achari. And here's the thing I'll say about Achari. He is going to have value if he plays the way he's supposed to. He's coming off of surgery. He is hopefully going to have something of a rebound, but being a hardworking, penalty-killing bottom six forward, we know that general managers fall in love with that kind of player. And Kyle Dubas is no exception. He is multiple times, not just with the Penguins, brought in Noel Achari. So he is one of those general managers, but it links back to something I said a while ago. The youth movement might get a little stalled to start the year and even into maybe November, December, because to get the youth movement going, you're going to have to move out some of these veterans. And in order to move them out, they're going to have to play. And that includes Achari. So, I mean, I am really excited to see where this all goes because we didn't have sky high expectations for a lot of these young players, but we wanted to see them make a point. And they have more than made that point in this camp, which is a really, really exciting thing for the organization. But I'll end the segment with this. We're getting all excited. We're all happy about this, but just tap the brakes ever so slightly. This doesn't mean that this team is going to be good. It doesn't mean that these guys are going to be stars. They still have a lot to prove. They still have to play. But at the very least, we can see the potential, we can see the growth, and hopefully it continues. But that is going to do it for our middle segment. When we come back, said it at the top, Hunter's our man on the ground, and the Penguins did practice today. So we're going to get some of his thoughts from training camp today when we come back. So stick with us. We'll get into that right after this. Back here on the Thursday episode of Locked On Penguins, I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And now that we got all the predictions that you're going to be able to clown on us when they are obviously incorrect in a few days, let's at least talk about what happened right in front of, well, Hunter's face, because I was not there today. He was. Big day in practice today. Obviously, we went over all of the roster moves, the guys placed on waivers, you name it. But Hunter, what were you watching today at the Lemieux complex?
First off, Pat, before anyone tries to clown on us for our little mock rosters that we know we're going to get made fun of right after the show, I have Rutger McGroarty and Kevin Hayes starting the season on IR. I did not forget about those guys, people. Let's be real here. Rutger McGroarty is going to be on this team, I think, once he comes back from IR. Might have to do a conditioning stint with Wilkes-Barre, but I think he will be on this roster, and they'll have to open up a spot for him. And I think at some point they will have to open up a spot for Kevin Hayes so he can play at least a little bit before some teams maybe come calling. Because again, Pat, he is also a free agent at the end of the season, and I don't expect him to stay on the team for the full year. Crazier things have happened. I mean, I said the same thing about Matt Grzelcyk, and he stayed on the team for a full year. So you never truly know, but I'm just giving my opinion on what I think will happen. So we'll have to make a little bit of room at least for Rutger and then probably for Kevin Hayes.
Yeah, I think
those guys are healthy.
I'm glad you brought that up because I did kind of figure that would go a little unspoken, is that, yes, we didn't forget about those guys. They're currently hurt. They still remain on the injured list for training camp. So you I don't want to say out of sight, out of mind, but the fact of the matter is the 23-man roster is going to be due in a couple of days, and they haven't been there. So we'll see what happens with them, but I'm with you. I think Rutger McGroarty has a spot either right away or after a conditioning stint in the minors.
Exactly. I agree. But going on to what I saw today for the noon practice, that is. So I sadly wasn't able to make it for the first practice at 10:30, but again, I saw all the players that were there, Pat, and a lot of these guys are either A, being waived or are being sent down to Wilkes-Barre's training camp. For example, Aiden McDonough, who I actually thought had a very underrated camp, he was cut today. He's going down to Wilkes-Barre. Look out for him this year, by the way. He was a point-per-game player last year in the AHL. This is someone who, when healthy, is talented. So I'm curious to see how he does for a full year. You also had Dan Heinen placed on waivers. We talked about that a little bit in the second segment. No surprise there. Out of the veterans that you could waive, he was the easiest. And I do think he will have a shot at getting claimed on waivers. I think maybe a team that needs a little bit of depth scoring could potentially claim him, but I also won't be surprised at the same time if he doesn't get claimed. You had Valtteri Pustin, who was placed on waivers. No surprise there. You had Joona Koppanen, who was placed on waivers, which also should not be a surprise. Philip Kemp was placed on waivers. You had Sebastian Aho was placed on waivers, and then Chase Patella, he was cut today. So again, Taylor Gautier was cut today. Scooter Bricky, was cut. So they were making a whole bunch of roster moves, not just going down to Wilkes-Barre, but in terms of waivers as well. And Pat, again, the full list for anyone that wants to know: Sebastian Aho, Danton Heinen, Philip Kemp, Joona Koppanen, Philip Larson, and Valtteri Pustin. Also, no surprise on Philip Larson. He's going to try to get the bulk of the starts in Wilkes-Barre this year, even though I think that should go to Sergei Miroshov. But in terms of lines at practice today, so there was a lot of very fascinating things today. You had Tommy Novak with Ben Kindel and Philip Tomasino. Philip Hollander was also rotating on that third line, which I found pretty fascinating. I think you might see something like that during the final preseason game against the Sabres. You had Evgeny Malkin with Anthony Mantha and Justin Brazeau. Avery Hayes was also rotating in on that line, so you could see him get some reps there during that game if he is in the lineup, which again, as of 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, they have not released the roster. I am sure it's coming later on this evening or potentially tomorrow morning. And then you had Ville Koivunen with Sidney Crosby and Rickard Rakell. You also had Blake Lizotte with Nola Chari and Connor Dewar. So you can't read a lot into it, but you can read a little bit of the tea leaves where it's like, these are looking like some of the NHL lines to start this season. You had Parker Weatherspoon with Erik Karlsson once again. I would very much expect that to be the top pairing. And then, of course, you had Caleb Jones with Chris Letang. I've already given my thoughts on that. And then you had the third pair was rotating a little bit, Pat. You had Harrison Brunick with Ryan Shea. Harrison Brunick a lot of times with Connor Clifton today. You had Matt Dumba rotating in down there. So it was a big rotation. They're working on some power play. They were doing a lot of 5-on-5 drills. It's a hard 90-minute practice, very competitive, very intense. It was a lot of fun to watch. So those were at least a few of the things I saw. You know, Sidney Crosby talked to everyone after practice today about Ben Kindel, and even just listening to it, you could feel his eyes really lighting up when he was talking about him. He's been really impressed watching Kindel in a lot of these games so far, and hey, maybe he'll get the chance to play with him again for a second game on Friday, TBD on that. So those were most of the things I saw today. But Pat, I don't really get your thought on this that much. I'll get it now. No real surprise on A, the cuts, or B, the players that were placed on waivers.
No, like you said, Heinen was the most waivable, especially early on. And it could provide, even though they don't need it, it could provide a little bit of cap relief because he makes, I think it's $2.25 million against the cap. And that's both a really affordable contract. And as we've said, it might not work right now because of the Penguins wanting to get some of the young guys into the lineup, but he is still a useful NHL forward. It's not like he's bad. And I agreed with your take in the second segment about I've wanted to see more from him in this preseason, especially as these young guys make their push. But realistically, we know when the lights come on and we're playing actual hockey, Heinen has value. And I wouldn't be shocked, or at least it wouldn't be shocking if he gets claimed between now and Friday, but we'll see what happens with that. I did want to spare a thought real quick about the Caleb Jones thing to kind of run that back a little bit. I do think there might be something we're not totally seeing because we're not privy to it. It does feel like he has developed some chemistry with Chris Letang. And given what they want to do with Chris Letang this year, we kind of want to see his minutes diminish just because he's not the player he once was. And if you put him with a Caleb Jones still has some potential. I don't think he's going to be a mainstay in the NHL. I don't think they found some diamond in the rough, but if he can elevate a little bit with Chris Letang, you can manage their minutes. You can put them in more advantageous situations. And maybe that's what they're thinking with that. Last thing I want to say, because why not end the show and reward the people who are still hanging out this late into the episode with what could be considered a hot take. When you saw Sidney Crosby's eyes light up about Benjamin Kindel, you know whose game Ben Kindel has really, really reminded me of? The fella who used to wear number 59, Jake Gensel. He's not that big, but he's got some wheels, and he has got really good hockey IQ. And Sid has been watching that game and watching practice and thinking, I might have my new running mate.
Hey, I didn't see Sid during the interview just because my wonderful coworker Kelsey sent me the audio because she was one of the people who asked Sid a question. I could just feel like his eyes lit up a little bit. I could feel it just when listening to the answer, but I digress about that. When it comes to a good comp, I like that one. I think Braden Point is a little bit better of a comp, but that's if he hits that potential because Braden Point is one of the best players in the league. Let's be real here.
Right.
So,
We're not saying right off the hop he is there, but
no.
When you see the fundamentals of his game and the way he has played in this preseason, similarities are striking, but he has got to earn that.
Yes, 100%. Again, I get Braden Point vibes when I watch him, but the jury is very much on him if he will, ever be as good as Braden Point. Don't think I'm going to go that far considering how great Braden Point is, but if Ben Kindel can be a very good top 6 player for a long time, I will gladly take that. But Pat, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's going to do it for a jam-packed Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you so much for hanging with us on this one and being patient because we know how Pittsburgh traffic is. We told you at the top of the week this is going to be a little bit of a weird one, but we appreciate it all the same. Hunter and I are going to be back on Friday with a new episode to get you ready for the final preseason matchup against the Buffalo Sabres, talk about whatever happens between now and then. And because it's Friday, we're going to want to hear from you. Keep an eye on our social media channels. We will put the call out for Fan Take Friday. We'll answer your questions, react to your hot takes, and anything else. But for now, for Hunter Hodes, I am Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back on Friday.